some regional thinkers in there that are trying to do something with regard to rural areas. One of the first things of the new policy 3 or 4 years ago, no longer rapid growth. You know, we're obsessed. Oh, China may be going down to 8% annual growth. Oh my goodness, it's going to crash. That's a whole load of. The Chinese government would love to have it down at 8%, 9%, and stay there without 10, 15% anymore, so that they can deal with inequalities. And what did they do? One of the first things they did was to stop the tax on agricultural products. Now, did that resolve everything? No. The situation is much deeper and much more problematic. But it has to be seen with regard to the power of urbanization, state-led urbanization, and urban industrialization. China is just an exciting place to be studying this, and of course the negative effects are enormous.
Eric Nielsen, maybe may I suggest questions a little bit brief?
Okay. So I was curious in the spatial turn, what, as a geographer, what role do you see GIS and Google Earth and all the spatial technology playing in the spatial turn itself?
Oh, it's part of it. It's part of it. GIS is fine. I don't have any sort of inherent problems with GIS or Google Earth. I mean, it's building on the fact that more and more of the population, it's not just academics, but more and more of the population are becoming aware that geography matters. And one of the most surprising aspects of this is that the new internet culture and the information and communications revolution have made everybody think that there's going to death of distance, the death of geography. We don't need agglomerations. We don't need downtowns. We can all be inventive in log cabins out in the woods. That ain't happening, folks. Geography is becoming more important in terms of all of the new technologies and everything. And so, yeah, all of these are, I mean, I'm not going to devote my time to GIS. I'll use Google Earth every once in a while. I'm fascinated by it. I'm fascinated by sometimes what's neglected there, whether it's Tibet or Rumsfeld's house was absent. But yeah, no, that's part of the spatial turn.
By the way, folks, I forgot to mention, like last time I forgot to do, there's a small reception afterwards in which we can continue conversation.
So I do all my work on suburban space. You actually summed up like 4 years of my life with how do we know if we live in a suburb? It's a good question. I've been trying to answer it for a very long time. So there's this sense that people have. I mean, I specifically work in American suburbs, but I think it's also a global question where we can't actually define what a suburb is, but we know it when we see it. But these suburbs are becoming increasingly urbanized, and urban spaces are becoming increasingly suburban in some ways, and in some cases. So is it even worthwhile to distinguish between suburbs and urban spaces anymore? I mean, do you think that that's still a useful distinction?
No.
Okay. Good answer.
That I think we're seeing the urbanization of suburbia progressing. Not everywhere, it's not happening that much in New York. It's happening rapidly in Los Angeles and Washington, D.C. around it. Mm-hmm. There is no traditional suburbia left in Los Angeles.
Mm-hmm. So then why do you think it is that people cling to the idea of suburban space versus urban space?
Because they won't listen to me. That we're shifting from the metropolitan model, which we've all been taught. It's ingrained in our brains. Even if it's no longer there, we just still think it's got to be there, right? Mm-hmm. That there's got to be suburbs and city. That's the way things are. And I'm saying, no, we're getting a new mode of urbanization emerging, a radically new mode that we must understand because it destroys a lot of our own old concepts and ideas, like suburbs. Just recently there was a book that came out or an article or something, which announced that there are now more poor people in suburbs, as they were called, as in cities. Wow! This should say, hey, our old ideas are really stupid. we've got to completely change our concept of the city. That suburbs are now filled with minorities, are diverse. They're not suburbs anymore. They have all of these new words, boomburbs, you know, people trying pepperoni pieces or whatever. You know, they're just trying outer cities and edge cities. This is the way cities have been growing in the last 30, 40 years. As I said, in many places there are more jobs than bedrooms. That's crazy. That can't be suburbs. Something is really wrong. Los Angeles, as sparsely populated, is now the densest urban. Now, not the densest. The city of Los Angeles is not denser than the city of New York or Chicago, but the whole urbanized area, the 5 counties of LA versus 23 counties in New York, that whole area, Los Angeles, is the densest in the country. What does that mean? But we still cling to our old ideas.
Means a lot of traffic.
That's what it does. The built forms haven't changed that much, so it's, you know,
Well,
the visual part of
I
it.
would argue that the distinction is more aesthetic than anything else. It isn't actually useful. It's completely aesthetic based in many ways.
There are aesthetic dimensions to it, but part of it is that the built environment hasn't changed. That's why Los Angeles has the most crowded housing in America. Because 8 million people come in unlike any other city in America in the last 50 years. 8 million, 10 million people coming in and densifying the area, infilling. You know, architects love it now. The architects are becoming specialists in infilling. I mean, what? Because they don't. That's what's happening, but they don't need to become specialists to try to promote it. It's happening. Los Angeles adds 8 million people. You know what? It doesn't eat up a lot of agricultural land around it. Its outer boundary doesn't expand very much in a couple of places, but not as much as the green world assumes is happening in LA. So again, it's shouting at you that your old ideas about the city have to be reconsidered. I started to say about globalization has to be reconsidered because of the link, but urbanization too, in that relationship, has to be rethought.
Thanks to you all, thanks to you, Edward Soja. Outside a reception, please go.